question. Thank you so much for asking it, Misty, and I love you. So, emotional inflammation, I am pretty sure there's not a formal definition. It's actually a term that I coined. I'm not going to say I'm the only person who ever used that or the first person who ever coined that term, but it's something that came to me in my work that I realized that was what I was helping people with, was emotional inflammation. So again, I'm not taking full credit for it, but it's a term that I use a lot that I really don't see that many other places, if anywhere. Now, what is it? And so my point of saying and sharing that is that because there's not maybe a formal definition, I don't have like one definition for you. But here's how I explain it and how I see it show up in clients. And I think it is very much something that we need to become more aware of in our healing process. And so when you think of the main four auric bodies that are part of your subtle energy body, we have the physical body, then we have the mental body, the emotional body, and the spiritual body. One of those bodies is the emotional body, and what we experience as emotions, sometimes that can get held within an energy in that part of our being as a whole. So if you, for example, are experiencing or have experienced at some point in your life a lot of negative emotions like anger or frustration or guilt or shame or embarrassment and even like fear, then you start to hold on that energy. So emotions carry a frequency, emotions carry an energy. And if we experience those emotions, that's a way of processing that energy. If we choose to push down that emotion, that energy, well, then that frequency is stored somewhere, because we know that energy through those emotions can be created but not destroyed. And so when we experience them, it's a way of recycling that into a different energy, versus if we refuse to experience emotions in our life, well, then it gets stuck. And I think of it as getting stuck in the emotional body of our aura. Now, we know that our physical body is what we can feel, touch, experience. Those three other of the main four auric layers of the energy body are pure manifestation energy. What that means is what happens inside of those three layers then shows up on the physical plane, the 3D plane. Those are more 4 or 5D plane. Physical plane, 3D plane is how that's going to show up, and you're going to see it. So when we are emotionally inflamed, and for example, have experienced a lot of fear, constant fear or survival state in the body, the physical body responds, but there's also an energy or a frequency to that emotion of fear that then penetrates through into the physical body and can show up. And we see themes in this. So we see themes around where specifically different emotions are oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes stored in the body. And so, for example, anger is often stored in the liver. Grief, sadness, is often stored in the lungs. So we can see some themes and some commonalities between this in different people's bodies. That being said, we are all unique and bio-individual in our own right. So I might store the emotional inflammation of unprocessed embarrassment or guilt in a completely different way than you do or anybody else does. So we are unique in that sense, and our bodies can react to the emotional inflammation in different ways. So it's different than a physical inflammation that you might get from eating an inflammatory food, or inflammation that your body creates in order to ward off some sort of pathogen. And instead, it's more of this energetic frequency that you never processed as a negative emotion in your life. So it has to be stored somewhere. And after, just like if you eat sugar, which is inflammatory for our bodies, you start to feel the physical effects. Same thing, if you experience anger, you're going to start to feel the physical effects as well. And it may show physical symptoms, not just like a feeling, but a physical symptom inside of your body. So how do you find out, to the second part of Misty's question, how can I find out the original root emotional cause of my rheumatoid arthritis so that I can work on it and heal it? Well, there's several different pathways or mechanisms by which we can discover what the original emotional root was, whether it is just figuring out the main emotion behind that inflammatory disease of rheumatoid arthritis, or we can figure out the exact memory, the moment in time, the experience, the event in your life that maybe first triggered this. But the thing about chronic illness is they don't just happen overnight. So it might not be just one event that triggered this, but it could be a layering of events in your life that eventually, like when you eat too many inflammatory foods or you ate gluten or whatever, like you get that bloat, you get the physical sensation. Well, if you had too many experiences in your life of trauma, of anger, of guilt or shame, that's eventually going to show up in your body too, and we can see that as more of a chronic issue versus one thing that caused one symptom that probably is going to go away a lot faster. So with rheumatoid arthritis and arthritis in general, what we see is the commonality, the theme of that is this hotness, this heat. So you can think of like red kind of coursing through the veins or through the joints as inflammation. And we see even in cartoons, people who are like hot-headed, right? And they get angry or they get inflamed in their head, and that red color shows up. And we even see it in, cartoon characters. Well, rheumatoid arthritis or arthritis is similar in the extent that for some reason I always go to the wrist, and I feel like a lot of people experience that in their wrist and their hands, right? They get really stiff and sore. And so that inflammation may be a lack of processed emotions. So another way of saying that would be there's a hot emotion. So oftentimes that is anger, that has built up, and now is literally inflammatory inside of your physical body. So that inflammatory thoughts in general tend to be linked to arthritis. Oftentimes hot emotions that are more typically more explosive. I'm not saying everyone expresses their anger in an explosive way, but if you were to express anger, we saw a cartoon express anger, it would be more explosive. But if you never had that explosion, you never had the processing of anger in your life, well, then you're storing it and it has to show up in a different way. Well, now I'm going to feel really inflamed. And the other thing that I see more in my work with arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis is, how do I want to say this? So it's like a constriction, a almost fear or resistance to going with the flow. So trying to control and restrict your life in some way, probably because it felt out of control and you needed to protect yourself, stay safe at some point. But after so much controlling and so much restricting and so much not going with the flow, now it's become inflammatory and has literally locked your joints up in a way that makes you feel inflamed and constrictive in your life. Okay. That was awesome. Thanks for answering that question, Misty. Asking that question, Misty. And if you guys have any other questions about emotional inflammation or emotional roots behind physical symptoms or disease in the body, I totally geek out on this and love talking about it. And it's something that I'm also going to be teaching you all how to understand this and how to identify this inside of your clients when you join me inside of Illuminated, my 8-month coach training program, where then you have the skill set to be able to help people like Misty's question today and identifying what emotion is behind any sort of physical symptom that is manifesting on the 3D plane versus those 3 other planes in our whole being. Okay, I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for listening.